What if I told you Saruman was right? He saw the threat before anyone else. He understood what was coming, while others still hoped. And yet, he failed. Not because he was wrong, but because being right cost him everything. Saruman is remembered as a traitor, and that's not wrong. But it's not the full story either. We usually tell Saruman's story as a fall from wisdom to pride, a fall from light to darkness. But that skips the most important part: why his choices made sense at the time. Most people talk about Saruman like he woke up one day and decided to become evil. But Tolkien doesn't write him that way. Saruman is, first and foremost, a strategist, a scholar, the head of the White Council, the one who studies patterns, the one who watches the enemy when everyone else is arguing about what the enemy might be doing. And to Saruman, one thing is clear: Sauron is not chaos. Sauron is direction. He consolidates power. He gathers allies. He weaponizes fear. And he waits for the free peoples to do what they always do: delay, disagree, divide. Meanwhile, the world is changing. The elves are fading and departing. The age of great elven realms is passing. Men are strong, but fractured, proud, easy to deceive. And even the good side has a problem no one wants to say out loud. They are not losing because they lack courage. They're losing because they lack unity. Saruman sees that, and to him, that's not pessimism. That's responsibility. Because if the threat is real, and it is, then hope without coordination isn't virtue. It's trusting the fate of the world to fortune. And Saruman does not trust fortune. And for a time, that seems reasonable. Year after year, councils meet. Messengers ride. Warnings arrive too late or not at all. Every plan depends on someone else choosing to act in time. But Saruman is watching a different clock. Because while the free peoples debate what might happen, the shadow behaves like something that already knows what it wants. And Saruman begins to reach for the one thing that feels stronger than hope: certainty. And certainty has a sound. The sound of pages and maps and quiet decisions made behind closed doors. Because from that moment on, Saruman stops asking if the storm is coming. He starts asking how to shape the world when it arrives. Not in public, not with proclamations, but in the way power always begins in Tolkien: in private. And that is what we rarely speak of, because it doesn't look like betrayal yet. It looks like preparation. So if you want to understand Saruman's fall, you don't start with betrayal. You start with a question he couldn't let go of. What happens when the enemy is inevitable, and you're the only one who seems to accept it? In the days when the White Council still held together, Saruman doesn't speak like a tyrant. He speaks like a steward of a future slipping away. He's not wrong about the weaknesses of the West. He's not wrong that unity is fragile. He's not wrong that delay has a cost. And that's why his next step feels so dangerous, because it doesn't begin as a betrayal. It begins as a conclusion. If the world cannot be trusted to act as one, then someone must act for it. And Saruman tells himself something very simple. This is not domination. This is prevention. But prevention has a hunger. Because prevention doesn't end. It only asks for more control, to keep the future from slipping away again. And that hunger grows quietly, the way it always does. At first, it doesn't demand cruelty. It demands efficiency. It doesn't say, take power. It says, use it. It doesn't say, rule them. It says, guide them. And Saruman, who once prized wisdom above all, begins to measure wisdom by results. Not what is good, what is effective. Because when you believe the world is about to fall, the temptation is not wickedness. The temptation is certainty. Long before armies marched from Isengard, Saruman's thoughts circle a single possibility. If Sauron has a center, if the shadow has a heart, then there must be something that binds it. Something that could change the war in a single stroke. The One Ring. And the ring becomes, to Saruman, more than an object. It becomes an answer. Because if the ring is found, everything changes. Not by courage, not by alliances, not by sacrifice, by possession. And this is where Saruman's logic tightens like a snare. He doesn't fear only Sauron finding the ring. He fears anyone finding it, because whoever holds it becomes the center of the age, whether they mean to or not. So Saruman begins to search, not loudly, not openly, but quietly, patiently, like a scholar tracing a rumor through old records, because he still believes he is doing what must be done. If the ring can be taken, then the world can be ordered. And if the world can be ordered, then it can be saved. It sounds clean. It sounds responsible. But Tolkien is very careful about this kind of thinking. The desire to save the world by force, even in the name of good, is always perilously close to the enemy's road. And then, behind locked doors in Orthanc, Saruman turns to an older kind of knowledge, a palantir, a black stone that reflects no warmth, only truth. Saruman does not look into the stone for temptation, he looks into it for certainty, because certainty feels like duty when you believe the alternative is collapse. And the danger of the palantir is not that it lies, it's that it shows enough truth to make your fear feel like wisdom. You see the enemy, you see movement, you see strength, and you begin to believe that only one kind of answer can meet it: control. But there is another danger too. A palantir can be looked into from both sides. Saruman thinks he is watching the enemy, but the enemy is also measuring him, testing his resolve, learning what he desires. And what Saruman desires, more than anything now, is the right to decide, the right to arrange the world, the right to make the future obedient. And once you reach for that right, the rest follows with dreadful ease. After that, the change is not loud. It doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives with decisions, small ones, that always seem necessary. Not at once, but over time, Isengard changes. The ring of hammers replaces the sound of wind. Smoke rises where there was green. Trees fall, not because Saruman hates them, but because he has no patience left for anything slow. And that is one of the most Tolkien things about Saruman's fall. It isn't a sudden craving for cruelty. It is the refusal to accept limits. Limits of time, limits of power. Because Saruman is still telling himself, I am doing what must be done. I am becoming what the world requires. But in Tolkien, that is the oldest lie of power, necessity. Because necessity is how evil borrows the voice of reason. And Saruman begins to use that voice fluently. He doesn't stop seeing the danger. He simply starts to believe that the danger gives him permission to do anything. And that is the moment being right becomes dangerous, because it stops being a warning and becomes a warranty. This is the pivot of the entire story. Saruman did not change his conclusion, he changed his definition of victory. At first, victory meant preserving the freedom of the world. Now, victory means preventing the world from falling, even if the world must be reshaped to accomplish it. And that is where Saruman begins to mirror the enemy, not in appearance, in logic. Because Sauron's deepest evil is not fire or armies, it is domination, the bending of wills, the removal of choice. And Saruman, step by step, starts to build a world where choice is a license, where freedom is disorder, where disorder is weakness, and weakness is unforgivable. He begins to think in terms of pieces: who can be moved, who can be used, who can be discarded. And he will tell you this is not cruelty, this is strategy. But in Tolkien, strategy without humility is exactly how the wise fall. When Gandalf comes to Orthanc, it isn't to debate tactics. It's to ask the question Saruman no longer wants to answer. Who do you serve? And Saruman's answer is one of the clearest windows into what he has become. He does not say, "I serve the shadow." He says the world is changing, and the wise must change with it. That the time of small hopes is over. That there must be power to order all things as we will. And in that moment, everything becomes plain. Saruman did not stop believing he was wise. He stopped believing the world deserved the risk of freedom. He stopped believing people could be trusted to choose well under fear. So he chose certainty instead. And Tolkien treats that choice as fatal. Because once you believe your certainty gives you the right to rule, you are already walking Sauron's road. Even if you tell yourself you are walking it for good. So why does Saruman fail? Not because he lacks intelligence, not because he lacks power. Saruman fails because his strategy depends on something impossible. Saving the world from above without turning it into a prison. Middle-earth cannot be preserved by control. Not in Tolkien. In Tolkien, the world is saved by restraint, humility, by mercy, by refusing to seize ultimate power even when it would solve everything. Saruman cannot accept that. He cannot accept a world where victory might come through weakness, patience, and chance. So he builds certainty, and certainty breaks him. Because certainty doesn't make you wise, it makes you rigid, and rigid things shatter. By the end, Saruman doesn't get a glorious fall. That's the point. He doesn't die like a Dark Lord. He diminishes. A voice with nothing left to command. A will that tried to master the world and could not master itself. Saruman is remembered as a traitor for a reason. But what makes him truly frightening is that his fall is not written as madness. It is written as logic without humility. Fear that learned to speak like wisdom. He saw the threat. He understood what was coming. And he tried to save the world by removing the very thing Tolkien believes makes it worth saving. Choice. Because some truths don't save the world. They just make it smaller. And that's why Saruman failed. Not because he was wrong, but because being right cost him everything. If you wish to explore even deeper into the ancient history of Arda, go watch our next video, The Complete Story of Gondolin, where the first 7 fathers awaken in the deep places of the world. Thank you for watching, and if you want more tales from Middle-earth, join us and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.